Welcome to the You're Not Crazy podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in healing from narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way. You can connect with Jessica and find additional resources, content, and coaching at emotionalabusecoach.com.
Before we begin, I just want to make a quick note. At the end of this episode, I spend the last 4 minutes walking through the way people work with me and where to find resources, my links, and my courses. If you are a returning listener or are already a client, you can absolutely skip that part. If you're new or trying to figure out what kind of support you need, it's there for you. It's the last 4 minutes. Thank you so much for being here. I am fully aware that many of you may not be able to implement any of these ideas, but as I was going through, a whole month of holiday-related stuff with my clients, I wanted to release this, even if it comes after the holidays, so it gives you something to think about. I also am conscious of the fact that the holiday transitions will continue to happen likely until January 5th. So if things are feeling like it's totally out of proportion or everything's chaos, you are totally not alone in that. Most people, or at least most people I work with, are feeling the same. And so I want to talk about what a lot of people are dealing with right now. And when people reach out to me during the holidays, they are rarely reaching out because there's something that's a little wrong or they just want to tweak something. They are reaching out because everything feels 10 times crazier for some reason. And it feels so much more chaotic, and none of it feels like it can wait till January. And they're asking why things that felt barely manageable a few months ago now feel explosive, and they want to understand why everyone is escalating all at once, or why everything is escalating, and why the pressure feels so constant, and also why their body feels like it's bracing for impact every single day. And in my perspective, multiple pressure points collide all at once this time of year, especially in high conflict divorce. Holiday schedules carry a lot of emotional weight for us and for the kids, and the other person really tends to try and control that as well. High conflict dynamics thrive on urgency. Courts are flooded with last-minute motions this time of year, and attorneys are traveling out of the office or just stretched really thin because if they're working, they're dealing with it or covering for others. And so children, too, are extremely dysregulated. I know that many kids around this time of year are very dysregulated, especially for all the changes that happen. Most of them have a school break. Obviously, if they're in a private Jewish school, they may not, because I certainly have clients that don't have a break this time of year, but they have it at other times. But for many in the public school district, there's either no kids in school or they're about to hit a break. And so everything compresses at the same time, and what might have been tolerable in October becomes really unbearable in December. It's not because there's new conflict, but it's because there's no room left to absorb the conflict. And that's why so many people say, this can't wait till January. But what it really means, I think, is I don't have the capacity to hold this much longer. And you will notice that the other person, the high conflict person, really ramps things up around this time because they know that there's time pressure, but also they're trying, their goal is always to dysregulate you. And so just to start, holiday parenting time is very rarely about the schedule. Every year at this time of year, people tell me that they're pulled into these intense battles. It's who gets Christmas Eve, who gets Christmas morning, who gets New Year's, which tradition, which gathering. And on the surface, it looks like that there's a scheduling thing. That's maybe what the court says, but underneath, this is a big power struggle. Previously agreed upon plans are usually either questioned or ignored. Even if there's a court order, you'll notice the other person is trying to change it. Last minute demands to switch days tend to come up too. And a lot of what the kids want are pulled into these adult negotiations. There's pressure and guilt and emotional leverage and people are exhausted. And I know, because I've written about 30 of them this month, that people are writing calm, measured emails that are met with these manipulative responses. They are worn down by missing deadlines, frozen communication, meaning no response coming back, and attempts to pull the kids into the middle of like, mommy said you can't do this, daddy said you can't do this, or, yep, there's a lot of transitions, must be mommy's fault, But in high conflict divorce, holidays aren't just meaningful, but they're useful as a tool of control for the other person to provide an opportunity to assert that control at a moment when emotions are already heightened and like deadlines are like very much there, right? If you know your attorney is going to be out of office starting on the 20th, you feel like this stuff needs to be figured out before we're out on our own and stuff's going on. From a behavioral perspective, these conflicts, like I said, are not about the holiday. They're about control. And one thing that I can say is that if you are dealing with a lot of transitions, because that's just what the court order said, you weren't unable to agree on anything. It's just a constant back and forth. Like if you're in it right now, the best thing I can say is to stick with the court order and do it and figure it out. And yes, you'll have to edit, and no, it won't be fun. And yes, the kids are going to be dysregulated, but pour your energy into that. And if it needs to be edited for the next year, do it. But release yourself from the power struggle if it's not going to serve you. Like I wish I knew years ago, before I got myself into this, that Christmas could be any day. I did not feel it when I was in it. I'm completely honest. But what I'm hearing the most, or the stress of most parents, is that there's just so many transitions. And if you can do not that you can really change it if that is what's ordered by the court, but what you can do is you can limit it, or limit the energy that you have around it, and just sort of put your energy instead into how do you support your kids through the transitions. Because another theme, and this goes directly to it, is that there's like relentless communication from the other parent. It's text, emails, voicemails, follow-ups, OFWs that aren't read, and each one carries this emotional charge. There are so many passive-aggressive comments. People tell me they wake up and check their phone before they're even out of bed, which I always tell people not to do, especially with a parenting app. But every response feels like a risk because you're afraid that every sentence will be twisted, escalated, or later used against you. So it feels dangerous. And this is a way that they can maintain control through creating chaos. And the point of it is to keep the other person anxious and reactive and unable to settle. And so if you're feeling that, really just set some boundaries for yourself about when you're going to respond. When you have the kids, give yourself some space, unless it says in your court order you have to respond in a certain amount of time. But give yourself some space and really try, to put these things in a compartment, because it's going to help you feel like at least one tiny piece of the puzzle is gone. The financial stress also becomes such, piece of leverage. There's so many disputes over expenses, but I think the truth is a lot of times, like, we're only responsible for what's in our homes. And so if the other person is not paying child support or claiming that they can't pay, all of this can be resolved in the new year when the courts are back open. Don't spend your energy worrying about it right this second, because I'm recording this on the 23rd and courts are likely going to be closed, most of the next 2 weeks, depending on where you live. There can also be a lot of fights. This is something that is very hard to navigate. Fights over traditions, sorry. Many people bring up arguments that sound really small, but there are these big disagreements, and that cause conflict and expose the grief over the loss of the family that doesn't exist, and sometimes it is through like love bombing, like the kids getting, tons and tons of gifts and presents and all these things from being with the other person. Sometimes it's about the other parent not really honoring what the traditions are. And when somebody blocks a tradition and dismisses a family connection or insists that their version is the only acceptable one, it's often less about logistics. But from a behavioral standpoint, this often shows up as someone being really rigid, refusing to negotiate, and blocking meaningful connection as a form of punishment. These are not healthy disagreements. They're boundary violations dressed up as what's best. And court and the threat of court feels everywhere is because every single thing increases it, right? So someone doesn't agree to like bring a child to a Christmas pageant that they've been working on all year, and like you're devastated and it feels like nobody is listening or hearing what you're saying. You know, the only place that feels like it could go at that point is court, right? Or really just dealing with a super upset kid and a super upset parent, honestly. And what I want you to know about court around this time of year, though, is that, especially in December, emergency motions increase, temporary orders are also increased. Lawyers are looped into every disagreement because everything feels heightened, and threats of contempt over these issues happen all the time. And so the courts become overloaded. So sometimes people will say, I can't even get a court date, or like my lawyer says we won't get this in, or the judge won't hear it. It's like, because if the judge hears a lot of motions about Christmas and holiday schedules, but they're also hearing a lot of other things. And you have to also keep in mind, people are also still filing for divorce. Like, it doesn't just stop because it's December. So the courts are actually very inundated, and there are more emergency motions. Sometimes there are like, there's still emergencies happening. Those, they don't pause because it's December, plus all of the overload of holiday motions. Court can impose a schedule. It cannot create, emotional safety for you. And so if you feel like the legal escalation is not the resolution, really try about thinking about like, how can I create emotional safety for my kid, even if I can't change it right now? Like, once the holiday is over, you can say, we are not doing this again, and I have to take steps to make this not happen. Or like, I have to figure this out. And I mean, that's something I work with people on all the time, but that's how I would think about it, is like, what is in my control right now? Because a core piece of this is that there's guilt underneath all of this. Guilt about not giving the child the best holiday, the right holiday, about wanting rest, about feeling relief at times when you get to sleep a little longer, or even guilt about the resentment that you're feeling, guilt about not handling things better. And so many people believe that if they were stronger, calmer, more healed, more different, holidays wouldn't be this hard. But it could be this hard. It could always be this hard. Especially if it's new, it's going to be hard, and you will get to another place with it, but it will be hard for a while. It's kind of just the nature of going through it. It's going to feel hard. People say to me now, like, oh, I know you don't have your daughter, like, and year one, I cried almost the whole day. That was when she was 5 years old. I cried almost the whole day. Year two, I had her. Year three, I was so sick that I literally slept the whole day and then picked her up the next one. The year after that, I had her, and so now this one, I'm like, I hope she has a great time. She's going to be okay. We already had our Christmas. Santa came early. She loved it. It felt very special because it was us and it was ours. And then we'll celebrate, with my family after. And they're also waiting and pretending Christmas isn't happening until she's there. So it is what you make of it. And it does get, sometimes I say to people, it doesn't get easier over time. It just gets different. Because it's also true that by the time many people reach out to me, they're at the point of, in this place of like, I cannot do this anymore. They can't, they are not saying they can't parent or that they don't love their kid. They're saying they can't continue absorbing the level of pressure without any support. And so high conflict co-parenting requires so much vigilance, managing schedules, anticipating reactions, choosing your words carefully, shielding your children, bracing for escalation. It's like your nervous system never ends. And that's trauma level exhaustion. And so burnout comes, and it's not solved by coping better. It's like actually solved by rest. And it's so hard for us to take in because of like, you're like, how? It's also addressed by reducing exposure, simplifying where possible, and shifting the goal from perfection to containment. So again, kind of goes back to my point of, it doesn't have to be the most perfect holiday. It just has to be the holiday that really supports your kids. and that feels best for your kids and for you. And maybe it looks way different than it has in the past. And it's also true that so many people are carrying worry about their kids during this time. So many people will describe anxiety or regressions, mood swings. There's issues at school, there's a lot of clinging, and very often they're blamed for these reactions by the other parent as if you have control over your kids, like your entire kid's mental and emotional state. In reality, you're likely the safe parent that is the support system for them. Children also do respond to instability or emotional tension and environments that require them to constantly adapt. And if your home and the other parent's home are so different, then they're going to be in a place of always adapting. And developmentally, they are probably absorbing some of that around them, especially the little ones. And what helps them more is not more litigation or tighter micromanagement, which I know most of you are probably experiencing, but it's less chaos. It's fewer transitions, more predictability. And I'll give some suggestions on how to handle that, but I just want to name that, my daughter really struggles with transitions, and it's like a week-long process and a week-long process when she gets back. But the way I think about it is like her body is trying to recalibrate, and her mind, and over time, the difference between the homes have actually gotten more controlled and more different on the other end, not more aligned, actually less aligned, which is not in her best interest, but I can't change it right now. I probably can't change that ever. All I can do is help her feel supported and validate her feelings, which I do over and over again. I think a lot of people around the holiday times feel like nothing can wait. There's a false sense of urgency, especially in high conflict dynamics. And so the legal system unintentionally amplifies it because courts are so flooded. And that's why everything feels so urgent. And I think understanding that matters, because instead of thinking, what am I doing wrong? You can think about what's actually happening here, because the shift often is the first moment that I see people begin to breathe again. Sometimes the most protective move during the season that you can do is choosing fewer transitions for your kids, creating some clear boundaries, and having some strategies that reduce harm. There's one parent that I work with who's basically said that she's not going to argue about every transition as her co-parent probably wants to, but what she's going to do is just prioritize what the kids need. And if one day gets missed, one day gets missed. Like all her entire focus was on, how do I make this easiest for my kid? I wish I knew years ago that when I argued to have Christmas with my kid in court, that it really doesn't matter. I was responding to my child's wants and what I believed she needed. And now I know that Christmas really can be any day that we decide it could be. And that actually brings the most peace. It was so much more peaceful to have Christmas on December 22nd. And so it is a legitimate goal to just want to survive the holidays. You don't have to solve everything. You just need a plan that asks less of your body, your child, and your nervous system. And so I want to offer some things that you can do. And like I said, I know this podcast is coming out after the holidays, but my goal is not to fix everything. The goal is not to fix everything. The goal is to reduce harm while your system is overloaded. And this is what I usually recommend. And it might be something you want to think about for next year or flag for next year. When children are showing signs of stress, reducing transitions matters more than splitting time evenly. Longer blocks with one parent are often far more regulating than bouncing back and forth, even if the schedule looks fair. And it's not about giving in. It's really recognizing what your child's nervous system can tolerate. You can advocate for this with the other parent, but as many as you know, it may not actually help. And you may choose to stick with the court order because that is easiest overall mentally. So if you're hitting a brick wall, stay with your court order. But if you have flexibility, use it to create predictability, not identical symmetry. You also can lower the emotional logistical load wherever you can. It's not a season for emotional performances or these big plans. It's keeping routines simple, scaling back expectations, choosing familiar traditions, over brand new ones. Let good enough just actually be good enough. Children do so much better when adults are calm and regulated, not when holidays are perfect. Another thing is, don't take responsibility for the other parent's feelings. Many parents feel pressure to manage everyone's emotions at once. You're not responsible for their disappointment, their interpretation of fairness, their emotional reactions. Your responsibility is to create as much stability as you can for your kid. I always tell people to document, and I will be coming out with some more things about documentation, probably January, February, but if things are concerning, document them, keep notes, save messages, but don't live in documentation mode. Don't live in a constant space where you need to document all the time, because that constant vigilance burns you out and it keeps everybody activated. Do what you need to protect yourself and then step away. Talk about that a lot in my documentation course too. You also can really just lean into trusting what you see in your kids without panicking. Their reactions are signals, but you don't need to assume permanent damage or permanent change. Just respond by slowing things down, adding predictability, advocating, and reducing exposure to the conflict. Because this season is about surviving. You don't need to solve the entire co-parenting relationship. You don't have to win the holidays. You don't have to prove things. You just have to get through and feel less depleted. Like I said before, I know this is coming out after. Truthfully, with the holidays, I could not get it done before. And then I wasn't in my office for some of the time, and then had my kid in and out of being home. So I just couldn't get it done. But I wanted to get this out because I'm still talking to people, like especially this week, about how the holidays went and how they're feeling. And I think sometimes, even if you're getting the information late, it's still something that can be helpful to help inform next year and to help normalize what you're experiencing. And so I hope that this was helpful. If you need support, you always can reach out to me at high-conflictdivorcecoaching.com or at emotionalabusecoaching.com. If this episode resonated and you're realizing that what you're dealing with isn't just stress or miscommunication, there are ways to get support that don't minimize what you're experiencing. I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes telling you about my offerings, because at the core of my business is one-on-one coaching. It's not, the podcast is something that I do because I do like being able to help a broader audience. But the truth is that the core of my work is really coaching and providing other offerings so that people can begin to heal. At the center of everything I do is one-on-one coaching. That's where I slow things down, listen closely, and help you make sense of what's happening in your specific situation. It's not a template. It's not just based on theories, but it's really focused on your real life. Some people start with a one-time validation call. That is a single focus session where we look at one specific situation or pattern that you're struggling with. And the goal isn't to fix your life or push you into decisions. It's to help you name what's happening, put it into context of reality, help you notice where you are in it, and offer some feedback and tools to how to navigate it. I also offer an intro call. The intro call used to be called the clarity call, and it's a short call where you can share what's going on for you, and I can explain how I work and whether I'm the right fit for your situation. There's no obligation to continue after that. It's simply a way for us to get on the same page before moving forward. For people who need ongoing support, I offer weekly or biweekly coaching. This is especially helpful if you're navigating emotional abuse, trauma bond, high conflict divorce, or custody and co-parenting with a difficult or controlling person. Ongoing work allows us to track patterns over time, stay anchored when things escalate, and make decisions in a way that protects your nervous system and your long-term stability. All of my coaching options can be found on my websites, emotionalabusecoach.com and highconflictdivorcecoaching.com. Both links are available in the show notes of this episode. In addition to one-on-one coaching, I offer several self-paced courses and programs. They're called Divorcing a Narcissist 101, How to Document for Family Court, the Emotional Abuse Breakthrough Course, Setting Boundaries with a Narcissist, and Unhooked, which is my program and private podcast that walks you through the full cycle of abuse, helps you map it out in your relationship, and shows you how to begin to break free from the trauma bond. I also write on Substack, where I explore topics like trauma bonding, emotional abuse, coercive control, high conflict divorce, and the cluster B dynamics. There's a free option and a paid membership that offers deeper dives, Q&As, and additional resources. Everything that I do and everything that I build is around one core truth and message that you're not crazy, you shouldn't feel crazy, and that even though I can see patterns in what you're experiencing, it doesn't mean that it's normal. It's not healthy. My work is really about helping you understand what's happening and begin to trust yourself again. All of the links that I shared are in my show notes, and I really appreciate you being here.